This is it. The award for our song.
Oh my, look at that photo.
That's us. All right, what a time. Those were the days.
The sun shone brightly over the bustling Antiques Roadshow tent. Collectors, fans, and curious onlookers wandered among tables filled with vintage treasures. Polished wood, old coins, and antiques of every kind caught the light, creating a warm, nostalgic glow. Through the crowd walked a man who seemed ordinary at first glance, a plain black cap pulled low, a simple t-shirt, jeans, and worn sneakers. No entourage, no flashing cameras, just a man carrying a precious piece of his past. It was Ozzy Osbourne. In his hands, carefully cradled, was something that had defined a huge part of his life. His gold record. Years of hard work, of music that had inspired millions, condensed into this shiny, iconic award. A symbol of triumph, sweat, and the relentless spirit of rock. Ozzy moved through the tent calmly, nodding to a few fans. A couple of people recognized him immediately, whispering to each other, "That's Ozzy Osbourne." But most assumed he was just another music lover attending the show. He reached the appraisal table, where a sharp-eyed expert was waiting, clipboard in hand. The appraiser's gaze was intense, already analyzing the item without a word. "Ready to see if your record is authentic?" the expert asked, lifting the gold disc slightly. Ozzy nodded confidently, adjusting his sunglasses. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation. Everyone expected a simple evaluation. After all, how often does a living legend's gold record come through these doors? But as the expert scrutinized the record, the atmosphere shifted. His eyes narrowed. The tone in his voice hinted at doubt. He carefully tilted the disc, examining the etching and finish. This is probably fake," the expert said casually, almost too lightly for the weight of the statement. The room went quiet. A subtle murmur of confusion spread among the onlookers. Phones were raised instinctively. Ozzy froze for a fraction of a second. His jaw tightened ever so slightly. He knew the history, the blood, sweat, and countless shows that went into earning this record. Yet his face remained calm. Behind the dark lenses of his sunglasses, his eyes revealed determination. The expert continued, pointing at the details he considered off. The whispers grew louder. Questions swirled in the air. Could it really be fake? How can this be? Ozzy sat silently, letting the expert talk, letting the tension build. The crowd leaned in. Every word, every gesture, every glance was now magnified. What Ozzy did next shocked everyone standing there. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "This is probably fake." A ripple ran through the small crowd in the Antiques Roadshow tent. Phones clicked on. Cameras zoomed in. Everyone stared, unable to believe what they just heard. Ozzy Osbourne remained still, his sunglasses hiding any hint of emotion. But inside, a storm of disbelief swirled. He had earned that record. Every chord he had sung, every guitar riff, every sold-out stadium tour had led to this moment. And now, some stranger with a clipboard was questioning its authenticity. The expert lifted the record again, tilting it under the bright lights. "Look here," he said, pointing at the edges. "The engraving is unusual. The finish is inconsistent. These details don't match the standard gold records we usually see." Murmurs spread through the audience. "This doesn't make sense," a fan whispered, nudging the person next to him. Ozzy leaned back slightly, keeping his hands calm on the table. "I've had this record for decades," he said softly. "I earned it. I know its history." The expert didn't flinch. "Maybe you earned it, but this piece, as it sits in front of me, doesn't appear authentic." A collective gasp echoed from the spectators. The tension in the tent grew heavier, like the air itself had been pressed down by the weight of disbelief. Ozzy's wife shifted in her seat, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Ozzy, maybe just let it go," she whispered, her voice tinged with worry. Ozzy shook his head subtly. "No," he said, calm but firm. "It's important." The crowd leaned in closer. Some pressed their phones to capture the moment. Every eye was on Ozzy, waiting to see if he would lose his composure. waiting to see if the legendary Prince of Darkness would snap under scrutiny. But Ozzy didn't flinch. He stayed composed, letting the expert continue. "You see these marks?" the expert said, holding the magnifying glass close to the gold surface. "They aren't typical. They suggest that this was produced differently, maybe as a commemorative item, or perhaps a reproduction. It's hard to say." A man in the back whispered, "Did he just call Ozzy's record fake?" Ozzy's voice cut through the murmurs, calm and unwavering. "I can assure you, I've held this award in my hands, celebrated with it, and it's a part of my history." The expert paused, slightly caught off guard by Ozzy's calm authority. He scribbled a few notes on his clipboard, unsure of how to proceed. "Sometimes," the expert continued, "authenticity isn't just about the visual or physical markers. Provenance matters, but even then, this doesn't match the usual production standards." A teenager in the crowd raised his phone. "I need to get this on video," he whispered, recording the tension as it unfolded. Ozzy glanced around. "I understand the process," he said softly, "but the true value of this record isn't just in its appearance or even its market price. It's in what it represents: the music, the fans, the countless shows." The expert studied him closely. "I see, but I have to be honest with the appraisal." Ozzy nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He just sat there, a living legend confronting doubt with dignity. The room felt electric. Every spectator could feel the clash of authority versus legacy. The expert represented rules and standards. Ozzy represented decades of hard work and lived experience. "Have you ever seen something like this?" the expert asked, more to himself than to Ozzy. Ozzy didn't respond immediately. He let the question linger, the silence thickening the tension. Then, softly, "This record is real to me. I know its history. I earned it." The expert's confident demeanor faltered slightly. The crowd sensed it. They leaned in, murmurs spreading faster than before. Phones recorded every second, every look, every subtle gesture. A fan muttered, "I can't believe he just said that so calmly. I would have flipped." Another whispered, "That's why he's Ozzy Osbourne." The expert cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Well, I suppose provenance matters more than I initially considered." Ozzy allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to form beneath his sunglasses. Calm, collected, and unshakable. He had shifted the room's energy without raising his voice or losing his composure. And still, the tension remained. Everyone in the tent knew one thing for certain. This story wasn't over. What would Ozzy do next? How would he prove the record's authenticity? Or would he let the moment speak for itself? The crowd waited. Phones recorded. Cameras rolled. And somewhere in that quiet tension, history was being made. The tent was silent. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade away. Every eye was on Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness himself, facing the quiet accusation. "Your gold record is probably fake." The expert adjusted his glasses, studying Ozzy carefully, expecting perhaps a flinch, a defensive word, or even a sarcastic retort. But Ozzy stayed calm. His hands rested lightly on the table, fingers brushing the edge of the gold record as if grounding himself. For a moment, he looked small, just a man sitting in front of an appraiser. But there was a weight in the room, a gravity that even the expert couldn't ignore. Finally, Ozzy leaned forward. His voice was low, calm, and deliberate, each word measured. "I earned this record," he said. "I played the shows, sold the albums, toured the world. Every chord, every note, this record is a part of me." The expert's pen hovered over the clipboard. He wasn't used to being confronted with personal history as an argument. Appraisals were supposed to be objective, mechanical. But this was different. "I've held it in my hands," Ozzy continued, "celebrated it, framed it in my home. And yes, it may not match the standard exactly, but it's real. It's mine." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. Phones clicked, cameras zoomed. People whispered to one another. "Did he just say that? He's defending it. That's Ozzy Osbourne." Ozzy's voice grew a little stronger, but never angry. Every word carried the weight of decades in music, of a life lived in the spotlight, of battles fought in arenas and studios alike. This record isn't just about gold or certificates, he said, gesturing lightly to the disc. It's about the music, the fans, the hours spent perfecting songs, the people who believed in me before anyone else did. That's what gives it value. The expert blinked, caught off guard. This wasn't the reaction he had anticipated. Usually, people argued, yelled, or grew defensive. But Ozzy, he was calm, poised, and firm. One of the spectators whispered, "He's not even mad, and yet he's completely shutting down the expert's argument." Ozzy leaned back slightly, letting the words sink in. "I respect your expertise," he said to the appraiser. "I understand why you look at it this way, but my experience, my history, it proves what this record represents. You can't measure that with just a magnifying glass." The expert swallowed. His confident, almost dismissive demeanor was faltering under the weight of Ozzy's calm authority. The crowd could feel it. They were watching a living legend reclaim his own story in real time. Ozzy's wife rested a hand on his shoulder, a quiet show of support. Ozzy glanced at her, a small, almost imperceptible nod acknowledging that he appreciated it. But he didn't waver. "The truth is," Ozzy said, "authenticity isn't only in how it looks. It's in what it means, in the work it represents, and I know what this record represents. I earned every bit of it." The appraiser's eyes flickered toward the crowd, sensing their shifting energy. Phones were raised higher. People were leaning in. The expert cleared his throat. "Well, provenance does matter, of course." Ozzy smiled slightly under his sunglasses. He didn't need to shout or prove anyone wrong. His calm confidence said it all. He had the record. He had the history. And he had the respect of everyone watching. A young fan whispered to his friend, "I can't believe how composed he is. I would have lost it." Another spectator muttered, "That's why he's Ozzy Osbourne. He doesn't need to prove himself. He just is." The tension in the tent shifted. The expert still held the record, still analyzing it, but now it was clear. The power dynamic had changed. This wasn't just an appraisal. This was a lesson in legacy, in dignity, in standing firm without aggression. Ozzy's calm, unshakable presence left a mark on everyone in the room. Even those who had come just to see the show, to watch an appraisal, understood that history was more than a certificate. It was lived experience, hard work, and perseverance. And yet, the moment wasn't over. The expert still had his doubts, and the crowd still hung on every movement, every word, every glance. What would Ozzy do next? Would he finally reveal the full story behind the record? Or let the moment speak for itself? The air was thick with anticipation. Every camera, every phone, every eye was fixed on him. And everyone knew one thing. This was a confrontation between history and authority, and Ozzy Osbourne was about to prove that the power of truth and experience could never be measured by a clipboard. The room had grown quiet. Every sound, the shuffle of papers, the faint creak of the folding chairs, the soft hum of the overhead lights, was amplified in the charged air. The crowd around the appraisal table leaned in, phones raised, recording every subtle gesture. Everyone wanted to witness the next move in this clash between a legendary rock star and an expert questioning his gold record. Ozzy Osbourne sat still, hands folded lightly in front of him. His sunglasses reflected the bright lights above, hiding the storm of patience and restrained emotion behind them. For decades he had faced critics, skeptics, and naysayers. But this was different. This was an object, a symbol of his music, his labor, his identity, being doubted by a stranger. The expert leaned closer, magnifying glass in hand, scrutinizing the gold record with meticulous intensity. Every curve, every engraving, every reflective sheen was under inspection. He rotated the disc slowly, eyes darting from the edges to the center. He murmured. "This finish, it's not consistent with typical gold records. The markings here unusual." He adjusted his glasses, scribbling notes. "You see, Mr. Osbourne, authenticity is not just sentimental. There are standards, there are details, the finish, the embossing, the lettering. It all matters. Ozzy's jaw remained relaxed, but his gaze never wavered. He had earned this record. He had lived the story behind every note it represented. And he was about to make the expert understand that some truths weren't written in manuals or checklists. They were lived experiences. He leaned forward, resting a hand lightly on the edge of the table. "I understand what you're saying," he said calmly, his voice low but commanding. "I get that this disc may not meet the standard you're used to seeing, but you have to understand I earned this. I lived through every note, every tour, every studio session. This record isn't just a piece of gold. It's decades of work, sweat, and passion. That's the truth you can't measure with a magnifying glass." The expert paused. For a moment, the clipboard felt heavier in his hands. He was used to evaluating objects, not the weight of history itself. He glanced at the crowd, realizing they weren't just watching an appraisal. They were witnessing a legend asserting the value of his life's work. Phones clicked again. A teenager whispered to his friend, "He's not yelling, not arguing, and yet he just shut him down." A woman muttered, "That's Ozzy Osbourne. That's why he's a legend." The expert studied the disc again, now listening rather than judging. He turned it slightly, tilting it under the bright tent lights, looking for inconsistencies he thought would prove his case. But as he examined it, he noticed something subtle. The scratches, the slight imperfections, they weren't flaws. They were marks of history, marks of a record that had been played, signed, and cherished. Ozzy spoke again, softly, but every word resonated. "This record has been with me through the best and worst of my career. It represents everything I've given to my fans, to music, to the art I love. Authenticity isn't only about perfection, it's about the journey, the story, the life it has touched. You can see the details all you want, but the truth of it, the soul of it, that belongs to me and to the people who believed in me before anyone else did." The crowd leaned in closer, phones raised higher. A few people whispered, "Wow, he doesn't even have to defend it. His presence defends it." The expert cleared his throat, his tone now softer, more reflective. I see what you mean. The provenance, the history, that matters too. Perhaps I was too focused on the technicalities." Ozzy nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of the concession. "It's not about you being wrong," he said. "It's about understanding the value of what we hold and why it matters. This isn't just a disc. It's a lifetime of music, of fans, of heart." The expert studied him for a long moment, the tension between authority and legacy slowly shifting. The crowd could sense it. Phones stopped recording only briefly as everyone realized the dynamic had changed. Ozzy's calm confidence, his quiet but undeniable presence, had redefined the appraisal. Even the spectators felt it. One man whispered, "You can't fake that confidence, that history. This is real." A woman added, "It's more than just gold. It's decades of life, of work, of passion." Ozzy leaned back slightly, letting the expert continue, but now on his terms. He had spoken. He had told the story not with anger, not with ego, but with calm authority. The record in front of them wasn't just an object, it was a symbol, a testament to a life lived fully and authentically. The expert paused, magnifying glass hovering over the disc. He had begun with doubt. Now, with every word Ozzy spoke, the doubt began to crumble. Authenticity, he realized, wasn't just about meeting a technical standard. It was about truth, history, and lived experience. And Ozzy Osbourne, with nothing but calm composure and the weight of decades of music behind him, had just reminded everyone in that tent exactly what authenticity really meant. The crowd exhaled collectively. The air shifted. Phones lowered. Murmurs grew into whispers of admiration. Every person in that room now knew they were witnessing something bigger than a gold record. They were witnessing a legend reclaiming his own story. But even in this quiet victory, tension lingered. The expert had yet to fully concede. The story wasn't over. Would the record finally be officially acknowledged? Would the expert publicly admit the truth? And how would Ozzy conclude this confrontation? Every eye was fixed, every camera recorded, and somewhere in that moment, history itself seemed to pause. Would you trust experience and history over appearances, like Ozzy did, or always rely on experts?
The etching is precise, it matches the era. So it's real? Without a doubt, this is authentic.
The crowd inside the Antiques Roadshow tent had grown almost reverent. Every movement, every glance, every subtle gesture was being recorded, photographed, and memorized by those present. This wasn't just an appraisal and a more. It was a confrontation of legacy versus doubt, history versus skepticism. Ozzy Osbourne leaned slightly forward, his hands resting lightly on the table. His sunglasses reflected the bright overhead lights, but they could not conceal the quiet intensity in his eyes. He had spoken before, calmly asserting the truth of his gold record. Now the moment had shifted. It was time for the real power of his words to take effect. "Look," he began, his voice low but commanding, "I respect the work you do. You study the details, the markings, the finish. That's your expertise. But expertise without context, without understanding, story can only go so far." A hush swept through the crowd. Phones clicked quietly, capturing every syllable. Everyone could feel the shift in energy. Ozzy wasn't just defending the record. He was educating the room, reminding them that value and authenticity were far more than physical details on a disc. "This record isn't just a piece of gold," he continued, his voice steady and unwavering. "It represents decades of my life, my music, my tours, my fans, the sweat, the late nights in the studio, the shows where my voice cracked but I kept going. You can't see that with a magnifying glass." The expert's confident demeanor wavered. He had faced countless appraisals before, but he had never encountered someone who carried authenticity itself in their presence. A fan whispered to another, He's schooling the expert without even raising his voice." Ozzy's calm authority filled the room. He leaned back slightly, letting his words sink in. "I've celebrated this record in my home. I've held it when I was tired, when I was happy, when I was fighting my own battles. This is not just a symbol. It's proof of a life lived with passion, and no amount of scrutiny can take that away from me." The expert swallowed hard. His magnifying glass wavered in his hand. He had begun with doubt, expecting to assert authority. But here, confronted with history, dignity, and lived experience, he realized that this record meant far more than technical perfection. Ozzy's gaze swept across the crowd. He could feel their attention, their energy, the collective admiration and curiosity. Yet he didn't seek validation. He simply let the truth of his story resonate naturally. "You see," Ozzy said, voice deliberate and unwavering, "authenticity is not just about conformity to a standard. It's about the life behind it, the work behind it, and anyone who has lived it knows it." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the spectators. Phones recorded, not just the record, but the demeanor of the man defending it. This was history in real time, a legend standing unshakable against doubt. The expert cleared his throat. I didn't anticipate." His words faltered. He lowered the magnifying glass, finally looking up at Ozzy directly. "You've clearly lived this. I can see the value beyond the markings. I understand now." The crowd exhaled collectively. A tension that had gripped the tent for nearly an hour began to dissolve. Phones lowered, whispers of admiration grew louder, and a subtle cheer began to build. Ozzy nodded, letting a faint smile touch his lips under his sunglasses. "It's not about being right or proving someone wrong," he said gently. "It's about understanding what truly matters. Respect, effort, integrity, that's the measure of authenticity, not just a certificate or a finish." A teenager in the crowd whispered, awestruck, "That's why he's a legend. He doesn't fight with ego. He just speaks the truth." The expert, now visibly humbled, returned the record carefully to Ozzy. "I apologize if I doubted its value," he said. "It's clear that this is authentic in every way that matters." Ozzy nodded again, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. The record was no longer just a symbol of music. It was a testament to resilience, dignity, and the power of standing firm in truth. The crowd began clapping softly, then louder, as if acknowledging not just the record, but the man behind it. Phones captured the moment from every angle. Fans whispered. He earned that respect without yelling, without drama. Ozzy looked around the tent, observing the people who had come expecting an appraisal, but were now witnessing a lesson in humility, authority, and history. The gold record sat in front of him, gleaming under the lights, but it was more than gold now. It was a story of perseverance, recognition, and the unshakable integrity of a legend. In that moment, it was clear. Ozzy Osbourne had turned doubt into respect, scrutiny into admiration, and a simple appraisal into a powerful reminder that true value cannot be measured by mere appearances, and still, the world outside the tent had yet to see this unfold. Phones would upload videos. Clips would go viral. Millions would soon witness a legend standing firm, not through confrontation, but through calm, undeniable truth. The turning point had arrived. The record was secure, and Ozzy Osbourne had reminded everyone present why he was more than a musician. He was a living symbol of authenticity, perseverance, and respect. The tension in the tent had shifted, but it hadn't fully lifted. The expert now held the record with a new respect, but there was still an air of formality, a lingering doubt in the room, an unspoken question. Would the truth be officially acknowledged? Ozzy Osbourne sat calmly, letting the silence stretch. His sunglasses reflected the bright lights overhead, hiding the faint glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. He didn't rush, didn't boast, he didn't need to. He had already spoken, already asserted the authority of his experience and history. And then it happened. A fellow appraiser, someone with years of experience on the roadshow, stepped closer. She examined the record carefully, flipping it gently in her hands, her eyes widening as she studied the engravings, the finish, and the wear. "Wait, this is genuine," she said softly, almost in disbelief. "Look at the marks from the original pressing. These are authentic, and the signatures, they match the certified archives." The words traveled quickly through the room. A murmur ran through the crowd, growing louder with each passing second. Phones zoomed in, recording every gesture. The initial doubt, the tension, and the drama suddenly began to transform into something entirely different. Admiration. The expert who had doubted the record swallowed hard. His pen hovered over the clipboard, now unnecessary. He looked directly at Ozzy. I see now," he admitted, his voice quieter than before. "I misjudged the record and the man holding it." Ozzy's faint smile beneath the sunglasses never wavered. He nodded slightly, letting the acknowledgement speak louder than any words could. The crowd began to murmur excitedly. "It is real," someone whispered. "That's Ozzy Osbourne's gold record." Another fan added, and he stood there the whole time, calm and composed. It was a turning point. The record, once doubted, was now celebrated not just for its gold finish, but for the story behind it. Every scratch, every minor imperfection, every mark told a story of a life spent in music, in tours, in studios, and on stage. This was history you could hold in your hands. The expert cleared his throat, finally surrendering to the truth. "Mr. Osbourne, I apologize. Not only is this record authentic, but it also represents a career and a dedication that can't be measured by a magnifying glass alone." Ozzy nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the respect he had earned. He didn't need to gloat. The crowd's reaction spoke for him. Phones clicked, murmurs turned into whispers of awe, and then into applause. One of the fans whispered to their friend, "I've never seen anyone handle doubt like that with such dignity." A reporter in the back quickly typed notes for the next segment, realizing the story wasn't about the appraisal. It was about the legend himself. The calm confidence, the unwavering integrity, the life experience, all of it had become the real story. Ozzy spoke softly, letting the words sink in. Sometimes people judge what they don't understand, but history, experience, and passion, they speak louder than doubt. This record isn't just metal. It's proof of a life lived fully, and of the music that touched millions. The crowd cheered quietly at first, then louder. Phones were lifted higher, capturing not just a gold disc, but a moment of humanity, humility, and triumph. A fan in the back whispered, This is why he's Ozzy Osbourne. He doesn't fight with ego. He shows you the truth calmly, and it hits harder than any argument. Even the expert, now humbled, couldn't help but smile. He had started the encounter with authority, with rules and measurements. He ended it with respect for experience, for story, for life itself. Ozzy's gold record sat in front of him, gleaming under the bright tent lights. But it was more than gold now. It was a symbol of perseverance, of dignity, and of what it means to stand firm without aggression, without shouting, without needing validation. The moment would not stay inside the tent. Phones had captured every second. Clips would go viral. Millions around the world would witness a living legend defend his life's work not with confrontation, but with calm authority, experience, and truth. And the lesson extended beyond the record itself. Respect isn't earned through fear or intimidation. It's earned through persistence, integrity, and humility. Ozzy Osbourne had shown everyone in that tent, and soon the world, that authenticity is measured not by gold or certificates, but by the life behind it. The crowd erupted in soft but sustained applause. Cameras recorded every clap, every nod, every subtle smile. The tension had finally transformed into celebration, admiration, and respect. Ozzy Osbourne leaned back, relaxed, letting the moment wash over the room. He had reclaimed not just his record, but the recognition it deserved. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching this was a story of authenticity, dignity, and the power of calm, unshakable truth. By the time Ozzy Osbourne left the Antiques Roadshow tent, the energy inside had completely shifted. What had started as a tense, almost confrontational appraisal had transformed into a moment of admiration and respect that everyone present would remember for the rest of their lives. Phones still recorded, capturing every subtle gesture, every measured word, every calm glance. The crowd had realized something profound. Ozzy had not only defended his gold record, he had demonstrated the weight of authenticity, the power of calm authority, and the dignity that comes from living a life of integrity. Within hours, clips of the encounter flooded social media. Fans posted videos, slow-motion analyzes, and reaction compilations. The hashtags began trending almost immediately. #Ozzy Gold Record, #Legend Stands Tall, #Authenticity Matters. Millions around the world were watching a rock legend silently reclaim what was rightfully his, teaching an unspoken lesson in humility and respect. News outlets picked it up. Music blogs, entertainment websites, and even international media highlighted the story. Ozzy Osbourne proves the value of experience and authenticity in viral Antiques Roadshow moment. Comment sections were flooded with admiration and awe. "I've never seen anyone handle doubt like that," wrote one fan. "Calm, confident, and completely unshakable. That's Ozzy Osbourne," wrote another. "It's not about the gold, it's about the legacy behind it." "Respect," said a third. The gold record itself became a symbol, not just of musical achievement, but of the triumph of truth and lived experience over skepticism. Every scratch, every imperfection, every subtle mark in its surface was celebrated not as a flaw, but as proof of a life fully lived. The record had become more than metal and finish. It was history, story, and integrity in physical form. Even beyond the fans, music students, young artists, and aspiring performers took inspiration from the moment. They saw in Ozzy's composure a lesson about resilience, humility, and self-respect. It wasn't about proving the expert wrong. It was about demonstrating that truth and experience cannot be measured by a clipboard, a magnifying glass, or someone else's opinion. The expert himself gave an official acknowledgement on camera. "After reviewing the disc more thoroughly and understanding its history, I can confirm that this record is authentic. It represents not only a career but a life's work, and I regret any doubt I may have caused. Mr. Osbourne has my full respect." Ozzy smiled faintly. He didn't need the validation. The world had already witnessed it. The cheers, the applause, the millions watching online. These were the recognition that mattered. Within 24 hours, The story had gone viral in a way few anticipated. Millions of views on social media, thousands of shares, and countless articles praising the rock legend for handling doubt with dignity. The narrative was clear. Authenticity is more than what meets the eye. It's measured by effort, history, and integrity, not just technical standards. Fans created memes, reaction videos, and artistic illustrations of the moment. In one popular clip, Ozzy sat calmly in front of the expert, the gold record gleaming under the lights, the caption reading, "Calm is stronger than doubt." Another clip zoomed in on his measured, unwavering voice as he explained the significance of the record. It became a viral lesson in humility, patience, and quiet strength. Even Ozzy's peers in the music industry praised the moment. Interviews flooded in, with fellow musicians commenting on his composure. He didn't just defend a record. He defended a lifetime of music and passion. That's what legends do. And yet, through all the attention, Ozzy remained grounded. He used the moment not to boast, but to highlight a deeper message. In interviews and social media posts, he emphasized that respect and authenticity cannot be dictated by appearances or outside opinion. True value isn't measured by certificates or external judgments. He said, "It's measured by the work, the effort, the dedication, and the integrity you put into your craft. That's what matters, that's real." By the end of the week, the gold record had achieved something beyond Ozzy's wildest expectations. It had become a viral symbol, a lesson for the next generation, and a moment that reminded the world why Ozzy Osbourne wasn't just a rock legend. He was a living example of courage, patience, and authenticity. And for every person watching, from fans in their living rooms to young musicians in their bedrooms, the story resonated on a universal level. Doubt can be overcome. Authority can be challenged with dignity, and true authenticity will always shine through. The Antiques Roadshow tent had hosted countless treasures over the years, but none quite like this. None had carried the weight of decades, the soul of music, and the power of a living legend defending what was rightfully his. As the final clip circulated worldwide, one thing became undeniably clear. Ozzy Osbourne's gold record wasn't just a piece of metal. It was history, courage, and proof that integrity always wins. If you believe authenticity and respect are more important than appearances or doubt, type legend in the comments below. Share this story to remind the world that true value cannot be questioned. Do you believe true value is measured by certificates or by effort and history? Comment below.